What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of SOTK Testimonies. This week we have a very special guest, a longtime friend of mine. He's been living in Canada for about 17 years. His testimony is incredible. His story is unbelievable. So make sure to watch all the way to the end. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the bell notification bell so you're notified each time we drop a video. And check this one out.
She ended up taking the bullet that was meant for her grandfather. I started crying immediately. However, I was probably one of five who came from two-parent family households. I had kids who lived in the house by themselves because their dad was in jail or mom was strung out of drugs, or there was a guy, him and I became really close. His name was Clinton, but we call him Gunman. The reason why we call him Gunman is because he had guns hidden around the school, so no one really messed with him. And it was the first time I saw a gun was in grade 10. And he actually threatened me because I told on him because he had weed in the class. And I ended up getting gang beaten that afternoon. But it was really after that where I realized that.
I'm excited, man.
Me too.
You've told me your story quite a few times. As your testimony evolves, I get to see it. You know?
Absolutely.
So it's different there, but there's parts of your testimony that I never experienced. I've heard you talk a lot about it. So if you could just hop into that, go ahead and share how you came to Christ.
Yeah.
And then wherever it goes from there.
Sounds good. How I came to Christ. That story is I think it's exciting. A lot of people find it very weird. I've always been brought up in a Christian home. My grandmother, my parents, always been Christian. There was a Saturday night. I used to love watching Walker, Texas Ranger with Chuck Norris, and there was a Saturday night where there was an episode. To make a long story short, there were Christian people that was essentially burning down gangbangers' homes and gangbangers wherever they resided. And there was the granddaughter of one of the guys that did this who really wanted peace in the neighborhood. And she saw her grandfather did that and she didn't like that. But also one of the gangbangers did too. So the gangbangers, their goal was to take him out. And so they're walking home from church as the girl and her grandparents on the side. And she ended up taking the bullet that was meant for her grandfather. I started crying immediately. However, she ended up living. But she died for about 8 hours. It's TV. She died for about 8 hours. And during that time when she was dead, she ended up seeing her angel. And her angel said she was going to have peace. And she needed to be the person that made peace. And so when she recovered, she talked to the gangbangers. She was instrumental in doing that. And none of them was interested. However, she whispered in the ear of the person that actually shot her, because she saw the person that shot her, and she said, "I forgive you." And he gave his life to Christ at that point in time. And what ended up happening was at the end of Walker, Texas Ranger, at the end of that episode, she had a big rally in this park. All of the gangbangers came, but they came looking for business. Like they were going to tell her to leave. And she went and she grabbed their hands and she was like, "Let's celebrate." Then the song Amazing Grace was sang, and that ended up being one of my, if not my favorite song of all time, because the words of that song and just knowing how God's grace and his mercy is always over us, it was pretty amazing. And it was that night that I went into my parents' room, I'll never forget it, and I said I wanted to give my life to Christ. I always thought I was a Christian because I was born into it, but it was the first time at age 7 I made the choice. And so I professed my Christianity that night to my parents, and the next day my pastor had an altar call and I was at the front and I did it publicly. So it's kind of my journey to Christ. And like I tell people, ever since that day, life became crazy and chaotic.
That's cool, man. And it's cool because a lot of times people, they'll try to paint this picture of like, oh, if you come to Christ, everything will be perfect. You'll have all the money in the world.
Yeah.
You'll have the best job. And it's the idea of like, God called you to his perfect plan, not to your perfect plan.
That's it.
And I think that's really cool. So obviously you live here in Canada.
Yes.
That's very obvious. I don't go outside of Canada. But if you want to just give us like just a little bit of who you are, where you come from, that kind of thing. And then just kind of bring us up to where you are now, your family and stuff like that.
I was born and raised in the Bahamas, Nassau, Bahamas. Spent the first 17 years of my life there. Grew up and came from a very loving home, 2 parents, brother and a sister. I'm the oldest of 3. And growing up, I would consider that I had a very privileged life. looking at some of the things that I've experienced throughout my childhood in terms of experiencing private and public schools in the Bahamas, and some of the kid stories that I was able to learn when I went to public school. I really understood how privileged my life was, even growing up in a small country. At the age of 17, I made a decision. It was supposed to be me and my ex-girlfriend, but life does not work out that way. She ended up getting accepted to Niagara College, but she did not have good family behind her. So because of that, what ended up happening was it was just me. And so I came to Canada by myself at age 17, went to college and never left. One of the main things for me was I wanted to just get away. Part of my story is I went to 10 schools in 12 years. Went to private school until high school, and high school is grade 10 to 12. And during that time from kindergarten to grade 9, being in private school, I never fit in. In fact, I did things the opposite. I tried to fit in, and it only made things worse. And so because of that, I thought I was a failure at that point. My parents really didn't think so, but I thought I was a failure. So I told my parents, send me to public school, because in the Bahamas, public schools are where you really see people who work in trades or work for the government. You're never told you can be something when you go to a public school. As opposed to private school, you can be whatever you want to be. And I honestly thought I would just be just a regular person. Didn't think anything special of myself. But as time went on in public school, I called myself dumb. But I was just full of myself because there was kids with real problems. There was, in a homeroom class of 32, I was probably one of 5 who came from 2-parent family households. I had kids who lived in the house by themselves because their dad was in jail or mom was strung out on drugs, or there was a guy, him and I became really close. His name was Clinton, but we call him Gunman. The reason why we call him Gunman is because he had guns hidden around the school, so no one really messed with him. And it was the first time I saw a gun, was in grade 10. And he actually threatened me because I told on him because he had weed in the class. And I ended up getting gang beaten that afternoon. But it was really after that where I realized that I'm just like one of these kids. I don't need to fit in. I can just be myself. So I earned the nickname Bishop. I was able to be a Christian freely, and they respected that. Now, some didn't care, but they respected me for being a Christian. So high school was really where it prepared me for where I am now, because I was able to see people in a different light and not judge people for the situations that they're in, and really sympathize with people and what they go through. Now, being in Canada for almost 16 years now, I had to make a lot of decisions very quickly when I first came here. And I had to grow up fast. And part of that, high school helped me with, but part of that, the church that I'm a part of now helped me with. Because if it wasn't for Wellspring Community Church, I honestly have no idea where I would be. My parents was obviously there, but from an arm's length. But it was people in the church at Wellspring that if I needed food, they fed me. If I needed a place to stay, I knew I had a place to stay. If I needed an encouraging word, they were there. And that's what church was all about. And to me, that's why I am not just dedicated to the church per se, because people can say that, but then if something bad happens, then they leave the church. But it's more so just dedicated to the people and the caring and the atmosphere at the church, and not the church itself, because we all are human and we're all going to make mistakes, and there's been times where people in the church have done me wrong. But at the same time, they were really the reason why I sit here today.
So did you do it? Did you do it yet? Did you like, comment, or subscribe yet? Go do it. You got some time. And that's true, man. That's well said. I think back to the days when I was in Montreal, like it's still in Canada, but the idea of like, it's so real. Like when you have a church family, it's like your family will never stop being your family.
No.
But there's only so much you could do from that distance.
That's true.
But that's really cool. You've told me your story before, and I'm always taken back by the part that you had almost seemingly the adverse view of what normal people would have. So people would say, like, I've always been told I'll never amount to anything.
Yeah.
Whereas your whole life were told you can do anything.
Yes.
So it's funny how, like, it doesn't matter what shoe you're putting on. Like, you're still going to see things, like, how does the grass look on that side, you know? But it's cool that you were able to, like, go into that world and adapt to it and then become the adult that you needed to be.
Funny thing you say that, because I'll never forget being upset at my parents. I had a close friend, his name was Barry for a while, and his mom and dad lived separately. So Christmas time, he had 2 Christmases. I was angry at my parents because I didn't have 2 Christmases. When I went to high school, a lot of the kids came from single-parent families, so they would go to their dads on Christmas Day, their moms on Boxing Day. I thought that was the most exciting thing ever because you got to celebrate Christmas twice. Yeah. It wasn't until at the end of grade 12 that I understood how they felt. They hated it because their family was broken. They didn't like it because they felt pressure because they had to put on a show for dad and dad's new wife. Yeah. And they could just be comfortable with mom. They hated it because they missed that family unit that I had. Yeah. And I feel like we all learn lessons out of certain things. And for me, it was really, I call it privilege because a lot of people don't get to grow up with 2 parents in a home. But it's really me checking myself and really being thankful for the position God had put me in to have loving parents who cared and who wanted to be there for me.
Yeah. That's important to say, and it's important to see because a lot of times people won't be honest in those ways where it's like you don't understand the pain associated with it. You only see the joy, right? And so being able to, like, that's why being a part of a church body is crucial. Like, you and I have very different upbringings. Yeah. And so we can communicate. We could see, like, if you were to say to me, dude, I wish I had 2 Christmases. Yeah. And I would say, dude, I wish I had 2 parents. Then it's like, oh, the light bulb goes off. But if you're always surrounded by everybody with 2 parents and that's the only conversation you're having, really.
Absolutely. That's why high school was really beneficial for me because it got me out of a private school type of mentality where I was trying to fit in, but I was able to understand, well, not understand, but I was able to see and sympathize with kids that grew up differently than I did. And I didn't know what God had in store for me in moving to Canada. So to now be in a country where when I first came here, I didn't realize that there were poor white people. Because that's not shown on TV. That's not shown that there's poor white people. You see poor black people, you see poor people from Indonesia or any of these countries. As I got older, I understood what God was trying to do and what high school was for me and how everyone was celebrated for who they were, for where they were at. So whether gunman, I use him for an example, and unfortunately he's in prison now because he killed someone. But I look at some of the other kids I went to high school with and see how they were able to overcome some of the situations that they went through. I'll never forget, there was a guy who got stabbed 8 times, and he is now in our parliament. But it's just small things like that where I was able to realize, because growing up in private school, you're like, you know what? I don't want to associate with kids that do this or part of this. But now I can have conversation with them and try to understand where they're coming from and not just sympathize, but try to understand them and communicate better.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm appreciative of you coming on just to share that because it's, like I said, man, there's power in your testimony. Yeah. And like when you're actually willing to step out and share it, you don't know how many people are in the exact same boat you're in that might find light, might reach out to you, might reach out to their local church, It's funny you say that because I tell people all the time, I don't think my testimony is that great because a lot of the stuff I went through in life, I caused it myself. Me being mischievous in school, switching schools, getting expelled from schools. I did a lot of it because of some of the stupid mistakes that I made. I tell people all the time, if they talk to my parents, especially my mother, her story about her perseverance with me is absolutely incredible. I'll never forget nights that I would hear her cry and cry and cry and cry and cry and just praying to God of she didn't know what she was going to do with me. And my father's so calm and stoic. He's the type of gentleman where he would be like, just kick him out of the house. So him and my mother balanced each other perfectly to where that did not happen. It was really them, and it really took them showing me love despite all the crap that I went through, despite all the crap that I put myself through, knowing that I can always count on them and what have you. It's the same like I told the kids that
Rose City kids tonight, find a community. Whether it's church, whether it's find a positive group of people that you can talk to, that someone you can turn to say, you know what, I need help, or I'm struggling. And that's honestly what the church did. Part of what I love about the church is, or even having a group of people, the right people around you, that's going to hold you accountable. I think that's the key part. When you were in Montreal, I was going through my own issues in around 2012, where I had never been to a strip club before 2012, never been in one since 2012. But every day for like a 6-month period, I was in a strip club with my boss. Couldn't tell him no. Didn't know how to say no. And I was in so much pain and so much hurt that every Sunday I drove back down to Niagara, because I was living in Brampton. I drove back down to Niagara, and the only thing that stopped me, I wouldn't say killing myself, but the only thing that stopped me from going off into just feel like my head bursting was coming to church and just sitting in church. But every day during the week, it felt like I didn't know who I was, because I was out, and it was so innocent. We're just going to go and get wings. Then all of a sudden we're eating wings at the bar. Then all of a sudden we move to where the dancers were. Then he wants to pay for dancers. And then it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Then I'll take him home for lunch. Then we go to his house. He has kids. I'm like, what is going on? I was never brought up in this type of way whatsoever. Yeah. But I couldn't say no. I felt trapped. And my wife now, we had broken up, because I had broken up with her because I wanted to date this other girl, and because of infatuations. Thank God my wife stayed close as a friend, and she really helped me with that. Her and another close friend of mine, and every day they were talking, Bernard, you got to quit the job. You got to quit the job. You got to quit the job. Me never wanting to quit. No, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. I can overcome it. Every day I said, you know what? I'm going to drive to work. He's not going to drive. But then he would call me right before I leave, come pick me up. And I would pick him up. Okay, we're going to do work today. We go to our morning meeting. We have the greatest sales pitch ever. Then he hops in my car. He's like, let's go to McDonald's. Now to McDonald's, go to strip club. All day. And that took about 6 months. And I think in 2012, I made about $9,000 the whole year. I don't know how I lived. My landlord was very lenient with me, and I lived off a petrol gas station. I forgot I had petrol points. I had so many petrol points from buying gas before 2012 that that's where I did my grocery shopping. But what that did for me was the people around me, and now my wife and a very close friend, Christine, and this church, they never judged me. They were always there. So when I came back to church, they realized that, hey, something's wrong. Sit down, talk with me, and then I was able to kind of get back on track slowly but surely. But it's crazy. And this is why you really need to know who you have in your life. And sometimes you need to keep people at arm's length, and that's okay. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell how I kind of got out of some of the trials and tribulations that I did. It wasn't fun, but here I am now.
Man, I think that's a cool way to put a cap on it. A big takeaway is like, you are what you eat.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you show me 6 of your friends, I'll tell you who the 7th will
Most
be.
definitely.
Like, and that makes sense. Man,
No problem,
I appreciate you coming on here.
No problem, sir.
And,
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I picked it all up. Yeah, for sure I did. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Like I told you, a lot to learn from, a lot to grow just in this episode alone. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share this video with somebody so they can grow as well. And with that being said, make sure to click the bell notification so you're notified each time we drop a video. We'll catch you later. Peace.